I've been sitting on this for a long time, and if this is the wrong place to post it, mods can take it down. I just needed somewhere anonymous where I could say it out loud without watching someone's face change when they hear it. My name's William. I'm not special, not some criminal mastermind, not even a particularly reckless person. At least I wasn't back then. I had a steady job, a beat-up sedan, and a bad habit of driving when my head wasn't right. The crime I'm confessing to didn't start as a crime. It started as a mistake. 1 second of distraction. One wrong decision stacked on top of another. The kind of thing everyone swears they'd never do, until they do. Years ago, I was driving home late after a long shift. I was exhausted, irritated, replaying an argument in my head instead of watching the road. There was rain, nothing dramatic, just enough to smear the streetlights and make everything look softer than it really was. I remember thinking I just wanted to get home, kick off my shoes, and forget the day ever happened. Then there was a sound I still hear sometimes when it's quiet. A dull, heavy thud. Not loud like in movies. Just final. I stopped breathing for a second. I knew immediately something was wrong. I also knew, just as immediately, that my life had split into 2 possible versions. One where I stopped the car. One where I didn't. I wish I could tell you I chose the right one. To understand why I panicked the way I did, you need to know where my head was before the accident. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't high. That almost makes it worse, because I can't blame it on anything external. I was just mentally fried and emotionally distracted, which is apparently enough to ruin lives. At that point in my life, I was barely holding things together. Money was tight, my job felt like a dead end, and I was one warning away from getting fired for being late too often. I'd already had one run-in with the law years earlier, nothing major, but enough that I knew another incident would absolutely wreck me. Court fees, insurance hikes, maybe jail time if someone was hurt. I'd done the math in my head 1,000 times before anything even happened. That night, I remember gripping the steering wheel too hard, jaw clenched, replaying an argument with my boss. I kept thinking about how close I was to losing everything I'd worked for, even if everything wasn't much. I was speeding just a little, telling myself it was fine, that the road was empty, that I was in control. That's the lie I told myself, I'm in control. I didn't see the figure in the road until it was too late. And in that instant, all those background fears, the money, the job, the past mistake, came rushing forward, demanding my attention at the worst possible time. I slammed the brakes instinctively, more out of shock than intention. The car screeched, hydroplaned for half a heartbeat, and then stopped at an awkward angle across the lane. My hands were shaking so badly I thought I might drop the wheel. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain ticking against the windshield, and my own pulse pounding in my ears. I told myself to get out. I actually said it out loud. Get out of the car, William! But my body didn't listen. I looked in the rearview mirror first. I don't know why, maybe I was hoping I'd see nothing. The road behind me was empty, streetlights blurring into long yellow streaks on the wet asphalt. No other cars. No witnesses. That realization hit me almost as hard as the impact itself. Then I looked forward. There was something in the road. Someone. Lying too still. That's when the panic really set in. My mind started racing through outcomes at a speed I didn't know was possible. Police. Handcuffs. Courtrooms. My parents getting a phone call. Losing my job. Losing my apartment. Losing the version of myself that still believed I was a decent person. I cracked the door open just an inch. Cold air rushed in, sharp and real. I could still choose. I knew I could. That was the last clear moment, the fork in the road where doing the right thing was still possible. Instead, I shut the door, put the car in gear, and told myself I'd only pull forward a little. Just to park somewhere safer. Just to think. That was the first lie I told myself that night. Once the car started moving, something ugly and practical clicked into place. Panic didn't go away, it focused. I drove maybe half a block before pulling over, hazards off, engines still running. I kept my hands on the wheel like if I let go, I'd float away. This is the part people don't like hearing, but I'm trying to be honest. My brain immediately went into problem-solving mode. Not moral problem-solving. Survival problem-solving. I told myself I needed time. Time to think, time to calm down, time to decide what to do next. I checked my mirrors again. Still no cars. No doors opening. No shouting. Just rain and quiet. I grabbed my phone and opened my Maps app, not to call for help, not to dial 911, but to see where I was. Industrial stretch. Warehouses. Closed businesses. A place where people didn't linger at night. I convinced myself that mattered. I wiped the steering wheel with my sleeve because suddenly I was aware of fingerprints, even though I didn't really know why. I leaned over and checked the front of the car. The hood looked fine at a glance, but I didn't step out. I couldn't bring myself to look too closely yet. The plan, if you can call it that, formed in pieces. I'd move the car somewhere less obvious. I'd check the damage later. I'd come back. That was the story I told myself. I'll come back. Say it enough times and it starts to feel like a promise instead of an excuse. I put the car back in drive, hard hammering, and headed away from the scene. Every streetlight felt like an accusation. Every second stretched longer than the last. And with every block I put between myself and what I'd done, it became harder to imagine turning around. I parked a few streets away, tucked between two darkened buildings like I was trying to hide the car's face. I shut off the engine and immediately missed the noise. It had been the only thing grounding me. The silence was worse. It gave my thoughts too much room. I sat there for a full minute, maybe more, just staring at the dashboard. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath in. I kept thinking, you can still go back. You're not gone yet. That voice was quieter now, but it was still there. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car. The rain had picked up, cold and needling, soaking through my jacket almost instantly. I walked around to the front, every step heavier than the last. I already knew what I was going to see, but knowing didn't make it easier. The bumper was cracked. One headlight shattered, glass glittering on the wet pavement. There was a dent in the hood, shallow but unmistakable, right where something, or someone, had hit. I stared at it longer than I should have, my mind refusing to connect the damage to a human being. I remember touching the dent with my fingertips, like it might burn me. My hands were trembling so badly I had to shove them into my pockets. That's when the rationalizations really started piling up. Maybe they got up and walked away. Maybe someone else found them already. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Each thought was a lifeline, and I grabbed onto all of them even though I knew they were probably lies. A car passed at the end of the street, headlights sweeping briefly over me. I flinched like I'd been caught doing something illegal, which, of course, I had. That was the moment the fear shifted again. It wasn't just about what I'd done anymore. It was about being seen. About being identified. About the story getting told without me in control of it. I got back into the car, soaked and shaking, and that's when I made the decision that sealed everything. I wasn't going back. The drive home felt unreal, like I'd slipped into someone else's life and was just borrowing it badly. Every red light felt like a trap. Every pair of headlights behind me sent a jolt of terror through my spine. I kept checking my mirrors, convinced a police car would appear out of nowhere, lights exploding into my night. I drove under the speed limit the whole way, hands locked at 10 and 2 like I was suddenly the most careful driver alive. My heart was still racing, but my body felt hollow, like all the adrenaline had burned through something important and left nothing behind. I rehearsed explanations out loud. I didn't realize what happened. I thought I hit an animal. I panicked. None of them sounded convincing, even to me. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in the car for a long time before getting out. I half expected someone to be waiting. A neighbor. A cop. anyone. But the lot was quiet. Normal. Indifferent. Inside my apartment, everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Shoes by the door. A dirty mug in the sink. The TV remote on the couch. That normalcy crushed me more than anything else. The world hadn't ended. My world hadn't even paused. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the road, the rain, that shape in front of my car. I kept checking my phone, waiting for an alert, a news notification, a missed call from an unknown number. Nothing came. And that silence, that absence of consequences, started to feel like its own kind of punishment. I didn't sleep. Not really. I drifted in and out of something like unconsciousness, but every time I surfaced, my stomach dropped all over again as if I were remembering it for the first time. When morning came, it felt wrong, too bright, too ordinary. I checked the news before I even brushed my teeth. Local sites first. Then social media. Then the police blotter page I'd never looked at before in my life. My hands were steady in a way that scared me. Like my body had decided this was the new normal. At first, there was nothing. No mention of an accident. No hit and run. No injured pedestrian. That should have been a relief, but instead it made my chest ache. It meant one of two things: either I'd imagined how bad it was, or it was bad enough that it just hadn't reached the public yet. I went outside to check my car in daylight. That was a mistake. The damage looked worse sober and sunlit. Impossible to explain away. I knelt down and picked glass out of the tire tread like it was a normal chore, like I wasn't erasing evidence with shaking fingers. Neighbors walked by. One waved. I waved back. I kept thinking about the person in the road. Were they alive? In a hospital? Dead? Did they have someone waiting for them who was already worried? I tried not to imagine faces, families, names, but my brain supplied them anyway. By mid-morning, the guilt started competing with something darker: relief. Relief that no one had knocked on my door. Relief that I still had my job, my freedom, my life intact. That realization made me feel like the worst kind of person. By the second day, fear had settled into something colder and more deliberate. Panic burns hot and fast. This was different. This was maintenance. I called in sick to work with a voice that sounded convincingly miserable, then spent the morning figuring out how to make my car look less like a confession on wheels. I drove to a self-service car wash on the edge of town, the kind no one uses unless they have something to scrub away. I focused on the mundane details, feeding coins into the machine, choosing the soap setting, because thinking about why I was there made my hands start shaking again. I washed the front bumper again and again, even though I knew water wouldn't fix dents or shattered plastic. After that, I went to an auto parts store and bought a replacement headlight with cash. Installing it took longer than it should have because I kept zoning out, staring at the damaged hood like it might start talking. Every small fix felt like a betrayal. Each improvement made it easier to pretend nothing had happened, and harder to imagine ever telling the truth. The article showed up 3 days later. I was at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, scrolling out of habit more than curiosity. The headline was small, almost polite: pedestrian seriously injured in late-night collision. No names. No photo. Just a time, a location, and the words driver fled the scene, sitting there like they were waiting for me. My hands started shaking so badly I had to put the phone down. I read it again anyway. And again. Every detail felt both too vague and too specific, like it was written directly at me. Same stretch of road. Same weather. Same time window. They said the victim was alive. Critical condition, but alive. I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me nauseous. Then guilt followed right behind it, sharper than before. I caught myself whispering, "Thank God," and immediately hated myself for it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over. It had just started living alongside me. After the article, I expected the world to close in on me. Squad cars. questions. A knock at the door that would end everything. None of that happened. Instead, life kept asking me to participate like I hadn't done anything wrong. At work, people talked about the accident in that detached, speculative way people do when tragedy isn't personal. Someone mentioned it in the break room, shaking their head, saying, "Can you imagine just leaving someone like that?" I nodded along, kept my face neutral, and focused very hard on not throwing up. That's when I learned something about myself I wish I hadn't. I could lie without saying a word. I could stand there, agree with the right parts, make the right noises, and let everyone assume I was just another horrified bystander. Every conversation became a test. I rehearsed my reactions before anyone even spoke. I stopped driving at night. I avoided that side of town completely. I started waking up at 3 a.m. for no reason, heart racing, convinced I'd heard sirens meant for me. The guilt didn't shout. It whispered. Constantly. Weeks passed. Then months. The police never came, but the accident followed me everywhere like a shadow I couldn't step out of. I'd be brushing my teeth and suddenly see the dented hood instead of my own face. I'd hear an ambulance on the street and feel my stomach drop, every single time. I checked for updates obsessively. The victim survived, eventually stabilized. Permanent injuries, the article said later. That phrase lodged itself in my chest and never moved. Permanent. As in, forever. As in, longer than my fear, longer than my guilt, longer than whatever excuse I'd built around myself. I tried to justify it in quiet moments. I told myself stopping wouldn't have changed anything. I told myself I would have made things worse. I told myself I panicked like anyone would. None of it stuck. What I didn't expect was how lonely it felt. You'd think guilt would feel loud, dramatic. Instead, it was isolating. A private gravity pulling inward, reminding me constantly that no one around me actually knew who I was anymore. There were moments, dangerously close ones, when I almost confessed. Not to the police. To people who trusted me. Late nights with friends, conversations drifting into that vulnerable territory where honesty feels possible. Someone would say something about regret, about doing the right thing even when it costs you, and my throat would tighten like my body was betraying me. I'd imagine saying it. Just blurting it out. Watching their expressions change in real time. Relief and horror tangled together. I pictured the silence afterward, the irreversible shift. Once you say something like that, there's no going back to who you were before. I even drove past the police station once and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, engine running, hands shaking. I told myself I could still do the right thing. That consequences were better than living like this. In the end, I drove away. Again. That's the part that still scares me most, not that I ran once, but that I learned how. Time did what it always does. It smoothed the edges without actually fixing anything. A year passed. Then another. On the surface, my life improved. New job. Better hours. A little more money. People told me I seemed calmer, more put together. I learned to smile at that, because it meant the mask was working. But there's a version of me still parked on that wet street, engine idling, door cracked open. He never moved on. He's frozen in that second where stopping was still an option. I feel him most when things are good, when laughter comes easily, when I catch myself feeling happy. That's when the guilt sharpens, like my brain insisting there's a balance to be maintained. I started avoiding mirrors at night. Avoiding conversations about morality, accidents, justice. I donated anonymously to charities related to recovery and rehabilitation, which helped exactly as much as you'd expect, not at all. I didn't get caught. But I didn't get away either. I just kept living, half a step removed from myself. Living with something like this changes how you see people. I notice hesitation now, the split-second pauses before decisions. I see how fragile, normal, is, how easily a life can tip from ordinary into unrecognizable. It's made me quieter. Less judgmental, ironically. When I hear about someone else doing something unforgivable, I don't rush to condemn. I wonder what their fork in the road looked like. The guilt never fades, but it does evolve. At first it was panic, then fear, then shame. Now it's more like a dull pressure, always there, shaping my choices. I drive slower than anyone I know. I stop when I see trouble, even when it's inconvenient. I overcorrect in small ways, like they might add up to something meaningful. But guilt isn't redemption. It doesn't heal the person I hurt. It doesn't rewrite that night. It just reminds me, over and over, that I chose myself when someone else needed me more. And knowing that is a life sentence all on its own. I don't know what I'm hoping for by posting this. Forgiveness feels too big. Sympathy feels wrong. Maybe I just want the truth somewhere outside my head. What I do know is this: running doesn't end the moment. It stretches it. It turns one terrible second into something that follows you for years. If you ever find yourself in that split second, the kind where fear is screaming and logic is bending, stop. Stop the car. Stop the spiral. Let the consequences happen while they're still contained. I was so afraid of losing my life as I knew it that I didn't realize I was trading it for something quieter and heavier. I wasn't caught. No dramatic ending. No courtroom. Just a slow understanding that getting away with something isn't the same as escaping it. You don't outrun guilt. You don't outthink it. You just learn to live smaller around it. If you're reading this and thinking, "I'd never do that," I thought that too. And if you're reading this because you already did, I'm sorry. I know how long the road ahead feels.